You're not half the woman my mother is." The words from my daughter-in-law, Valerie, sliced through the air that evening as I served the dessert I'd made with so much love. A profound silence fell over the dining room. My heart pounded in my chest. Without thinking, I pushed my chair back and replied, "Then she can start paying your rent." My son, Robert, went completely pale. "Rent? What rent?" he yelled, his eyes wide. At that moment, I knew my life was about to change forever, and this revelation was just the beginning of a story no one saw coming. My name is Shirley. I'm 70 years old, and on that night, I discovered that a mother's unconditional love could become her greatest weakness. For 6 months, I had been secretly paying the $800 monthly rent for the apartment where Robert and Valerie lived. I believed it was my duty to help my son through his financial struggles. I never imagined that while I was sacrificing my life savings, they saw me as a burden, as someone inferior they could humiliate without consequence. It had all started 6 months earlier when Robert came to my house, tears in his eyes, explaining that he had lost his job and they couldn't afford their rent. "Mom, it'll only be for a few months until I find something," he'd said, with that broken voice that always disarmed me. Like any mother who loves her child, I didn't hesitate for a second. I dipped into my savings, the money I'd saved penny by penny over the years working as a seamstress, and started paying their rent without Valerie's knowledge. "It's our secret, Mom," Robert had pleaded. "I don't want Valerie to feel bad about depending on you." How naive I was to believe he was protecting his wife's pride when he was actually protecting his own image as a provider. While I was counting every dollar to help them, they lived as if nothing had changed, going out to dinner, buying new clothes, and planning vacations I knew they couldn't afford. Dinner that night had been special. I'd spent all day cooking his favorite meal, chicken with mushroom sauce, rice with vegetables, and that vanilla pudding he'd loved since he was a little boy. The table was set perfectly with the crystal glasses I'd inherited from my mother, and the silver cutlery I only used on special occasions. Valerie arrived in an elegant red dress and shoes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. From the moment they walked in, I noticed a different vibe. Valerie had that forced smile I knew so well, the one she used when she was about to do something unpleasant. Robert seemed nervous, avoiding my gaze and constantly fidgeting with his phone. During dinner, the conversation was tense. Valerie criticized everything: the food's temperature, my home's decor, even the air freshener scent in the living room. "Shirley, don't you think it's time you freshened this place up a bit?" she had commented with that condescending tone that so annoyed me. "My mom's house is so much more modern. She has those trendy minimalist pieces." I smiled, trying to maintain harmony, but inside I felt my irritation mounting. I'd lived in that house for 30 years. Every object held a memory. Every corner told a story. When it was time for dessert, I thought we could finally enjoy a pleasant moment. I'd made the pudding with such care, remembering how Robert used to devour it as a child, telling me I was the best cook in the world. But instead of gratitude, I received those words that pierced my soul like thorns. "You're not half the woman my mother is." The impact of those words was like a slap to the face. I froze with the pudding spoon suspended in midair, feeling a lump of emotion swell in my throat. Valerie looked at me with a cruel smile, as if she'd been waiting all night for the perfect moment to hurt me. Robert lowered his head, avoiding my eyes. In that instant, I knew he had been in on his wife's plan. "Excuse me?" I managed to choke out, my voice trembling, though I knew I'd heard her perfectly. Valerie leaned back in her chair with a false elegance, as if she were the owner of my house, and repeated the words with even greater cruelty. "You heard me, Shirley. My mother is a successful, independent woman who built her own empire. She's never needed anyone. She has her own company, her beach house in Florida, her trips to Europe. You? Well, you just know how to cook and sew." Each word hammered at my heart. I thought of all the years I'd worked from 5 in the morning until 11 at night, sewing dresses for sweet 16 parties, altering suits for grooms, embroidering tablecloths for other people's weddings, while I never had the chance to plan my own. I remembered the sleepless nights when Robert was small and had a fever, how I sold my few pieces of jewelry to pay for his college tuition, and how I worked double shifts so he could have everything he needed. "Valerie, please," Robert muttered weakly, without the strength to truly defend me. Those 2 words were worse than silence, because they confirmed that he agreed with his wife, that he had been part of this planned humiliation. My son, the same boy who once told me I was his hero, was now allowing me to be treated like a servant in my own home. "No, Robert, let me finish," Valerie continued in that high-pitched voice she used when she wanted to sound superior. "Your mother needs to hear the truth. My mother would never have allowed her son to live in this mediocrity." She made a dismissive gesture, pointing at my dining room, where so many beautiful memories were held. "She would have helped us get something better. She wouldn't have kept us in poverty with her false kindness." It was at that moment that something inside me snapped. It wasn't just the injustice of her words, but the absolute ingratitude of someone who had been living off my generosity without knowing it. For 6 months, I had been the one paying for the roof over their arrogant heads. I had deprived myself of medicine for my arthritis to ensure they had a comfortable place to live. I rose slowly from my chair, feeling an adrenaline rush I hadn't felt in years. "All right, Valerie," I said with a calm that surprised me. "If your mother is so superior, if she's such a better woman than me, then I think it's time for her to assume the responsibilities a successful woman should have." Robert looked at me, confused, but Valerie kept that smug smile on her face, as if she'd won a battle. "Exactly, Shirley. I'm glad you finally understand your place in this family." "Oh, I understand my place perfectly," I replied, my voice growing firmer with each word. "And my place no longer includes paying the $900 a month for your apartment at 420 Hamilton Street, Unit 3. The silence that followed was so deep, I could hear the kitchen clock ticking. Robert stood up so abruptly, he knocked over his water glass. "What rent?" he yelled, his eyes wide, looking at me as if I'd spoken a foreign language. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Valerie's arrogant smile had vanished completely. Now she looked at me with a mix of terror and confusion that gave me immense satisfaction. "The rent I've been religiously paying every month since February," I continued, savoring every second of their bewilderment. $900 that comes from my bank account on the 5th of every month, plus the $100 in additional fees the landlord charges for a direct deposit. $1,000 in total that I pay so you can live comfortably while you disrespect me." Robert collapsed into his chair as if his legs could no longer hold him. "But you told me you talked to the landlord, that he was giving you time to get the money," he stammered, his voice broken. Valerie looked at him with a fury I'd never seen before, as if he were to blame for ruining her moment of glory. "I lied," I admitted without a hint of remorse. "I lied because I thought I was helping my son. I thought it was temporary. I thought you would appreciate the sacrifice someday. But now I see that to you. I'm just a silly old woman who deserves to be humiliated." Valerie tried to regain her composure, but her voice had lost its arrogant confidence. "Shirley, I didn't know you. Robert never told me that you were paying," she began to stutter. But I interrupted her, raising my hand. "I'm not interested in your excuses, dear. If your mother is as wonderful as you say, I'm sure she'll be happy to take on this responsibility. After all, a woman so successful and independent wouldn't have any problem paying for her daughter and son-in-law's rent, would she?" The irony in my voice was so evident that even Robert flinched. The atmosphere in the dining room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Valerie glanced back and forth between Robert and me, as if she were quickly calculating the implications of what she'd just discovered. Robert's hands were trembling, and he had started to sweat. "Mom, why didn't you tell me the truth?" he finally asked, his voice cracking. "Why did you make me believe you'd worked something out with the landlord?" Robert's question echoed in the dining room like a painful... "I lied because you're my son, Robert. Because when you came to my house crying, telling me you had lost everything and didn't even have money for food, I couldn't stand by and watch the boy I raised, the man I love more than my own life, suffer." Valerie remained silent, but I could see her mind racing to process the implications of my revelation. The pink color from her expensive makeup had drained from her cheeks, and she looked ashen. Robert ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he'd made since he was a child when he was nervous or scared. I lied, I continued, my voice growing firmer, because I thought it was temporary, because I believed that when you recovered financially and found a stable job, you would thank me. I never imagined that while I was depriving myself of medicine for my arthritis, while I stopped buying meat to save those $900 a month, you two were plotting how to humiliate me in my own home. Robert tried to interrupt me, but I raised my hand to silence him. No, now you're going to listen to me, Robert. For 6 months, I've been eating rice and eggs for dinner. I've been wearing the same pair of broken shoes because I didn't have money for new ones. You know what I did last week? I sold your father's wedding ring. That ring I'd kept as my most prized treasure, just to pay your rent and have some food in my fridge. Tears welled up in my eyes, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. I sold the only physical memory I had of my husband, of the man who had loved me for 30 years, to support a couple who considered me inferior, mediocre, and unworthy of respect. Valerie finally found her voice, though it was small and shaky now. Surely I didn't know. Robert never told me that you were paying, but I cut her off with a look that could have melted steel. Of course you didn't know, dear, because your husband chose to lie to you too. He preferred for you to believe that he had earned the money on his own rather than admit he was depending on his mother. Mediocre. I spat out the word mediocre with such venom that Valerie visibly recoiled. Robert finally exploded. Mom, I never wanted it to be this way. You insisted. I didn't ask you to sacrifice so much. His voice sounded desperate, like a child caught in a lie, but his words only fueled my fury. I insisted, I yelled, finally losing my composure. You came to my house sobbing like a 5-year-old. You told me you couldn't even afford bread, that Valerie was crying every night from the shame of not being able to pay the bills. What kind of mother would I have been if I had closed my door on you? The silence that followed was devastating. Robert looked at Valerie with a look of reproach that she returned with equal intensity. It was clear that there were secrets and lies on both sides, and that neither of them had been completely honest with the other. You know what hurts the most, Robert? I continued, feeling the tears streaming down my wrinkled cheeks. It's not the money. It's not the sacrifice. It's that for all these months, every time you came to visit, I saw contempt in your eyes. Valerie criticized my house, my food, my clothes, my manners, all while not knowing that my money was paying for her roof. And you just let her do it. Robert tried to approach me, but I took a step back. Mom, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain, I cut him off sharply. The explanation just came out. Your wife believes I'm not half the woman her mother is. Well, then her mother can show what kind of woman she is by taking care of her responsibilities. Valerie finally found some courage to speak, though her voice still trembled. Surely, my words were said in a moment of, I was upset about other things. I interrupted her with a bitter laugh. You were upset about having to eat at the home of the woman who pays your rent? Upset because you had to pretend to be cordial with someone you consider so inferior? The tension in the air was so dense, you could have cut it with a knife. Robert paced the dining room like a caged animal, while Valerie sat twisting a napkin between her trembling hands. You know what's the saddest part of all this? I continued, feeling a strange calm come over me. I really believed we were a family. When I married your father, Robert, I dreamed of having many children, with grandkids running through this house, with family dinners full of laughter and love. After years of trying to get pregnant, when you finally came, I thought God had given me the greatest gift in the world. Robert stopped and looked at me, his eyes full of tears. Mom, I love you. You know I love you. Love isn't just words, son. Love is actions. It's respect. It's protection. When your wife insults me and you stay silent, when you let her humiliate me in my own home, when you lie to me to hide that you depend on me financially. That's not love. That's convenience." Valerie stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. "That's enough. I'm not going to stand here and listen to this sermon. Robert, we're leaving now." Her voice had regained some of her usual arrogance, but I could see the panic in her eyes. "No," Robert said firmly, surprising us both. "We're not leaving until we sort this out. Mom, please sit down. We need to talk like adults." But I had already made my decision. "There's nothing left to talk about, Robert. The cards are on the table. Your wife has made her feelings about me very clear, and you have shown that you agree with her. Starting tomorrow, I will no longer be paying your rent. If Valerie's mother is as superior as she says, I'm sure she'll find a way to help you." "But Mom, you can't do that," Robert cried. And for the first time all night, I saw real terror in his eyes. "We don't have the money. I was fired 2 weeks ago. I was going to tell you after dinner." Robert's words hit the dining room like a bomb. "You were fired 2 weeks ago?" I repeated slowly, a new wave of betrayal washing over me. "And you didn't tell me anything? You allowed your wife to humiliate me, knowing that you were completely dependent on me?" My voice broke on the last word, not from sadness, but from a rage so profound that my hands were shaking. Valerie turned to Robert, her eyes blazing with fury. "What? You were fired 2 weeks ago, and you didn't tell me? I've been spending money as if everything were normal while you—" She couldn't finish the sentence. She put her hands over her face and began sobbing dramatically, like an actress in a soap opera. "Valerie, please let me explain," Robert began, but she cut him off with a gasp. "Don't tell me to calm down. Just yesterday I bought those $400 shoes. Last week I booked the spa for my birthday. Robert, we're broke and you let me spend like an idiot." Her tears had completely ruined her makeup, and now she looked exactly like what she was, a desperate and terrified woman. I watched the surreal scene, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and pain. For months, I had carried the weight of supporting this couple, and now they were finally facing the reality of their situation. Robert looked defeated, his shoulders slumped, and his face in his hands. "You know what's the most pathetic part of all this, Robert?" I said with a calm that surprised me. "Even now, after discovering that you've been lying to me and humiliating me, my first instinct is to ask if you need help. That's what a mother does, son. That's what unconditional love does." Robert looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw the little boy who used to run to me when he had nightmares. "Mom, I lost my job because I was late 3 times in a row. Valerie had been sick, and I had to take care of her, take her to the doctor, and—" Valerie cut him off with a murderous look. "I wasn't sick. I had appointments with my dermatologist for my beauty treatments. Don't use me as an excuse for your irresponsibility." The mask had fallen completely. The elegant, superior woman who had arrived at my house had disappeared, revealing someone vulgar and desperate. "Beauty treatments?" I asked in disbelief. "Are you telling me my son lost his job because he had to take you to beauty treatments while I sold my jewelry to pay for your roof?" A laugh so bitter it scared me, escaped my throat. Robert approached me, his hands outstretched in a pleading gesture. "Mom, please. I know I made mistakes. I know I failed you, but you can't abandon us now. We have nowhere to go. Valerie's parents are in Europe and—" Valerie interrupted him again. "My parents aren't in Europe. They're in town. You told me to tell you we were fine so they wouldn't worry." One lie after another was being peeled back like the layers of a rotten onion, and "How many jobs have you lost, Robert?" I asked in a voice so low I could barely hear it. "How many times have you lied to me?" The silence that followed was deafening. Robert couldn't look me in the eyes, and Valerie had started to sob again, but this time it was more genuine, as if she had finally understood the magnitude of their situation. "3 jobs in the last 2 years, Robert finally admitted, his voice broken. "I always found excuses. I always told you it was temporary, that companies were downsizing." He paused and looked at me with those eyes that were once my whole world. "Mom, I have a problem. I think I have a real problem." For the first time all night, I felt something akin to compassion. My son wasn't just a liar. He was someone who needed professional help. But compassion didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't heal the wounds his words and his wife's words had opened in my heart. "Robert," I said slowly, "admitting you have a problem is the first step, but I can't keep being your safety net while you do nothing to change. I can't keep sacrificing my well-being to maintain a life based on lies." Valerie stood up abruptly, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her red dress. "This is ridiculous, Shirley. You're his mother. Mothers don't abandon their children. My mother would never do this to me." The arrogance had returned to her voice, like a defensive armor. "Your mother has never had to deal with this because you've never told her the truth," I replied with an icy calm. "And you're right about one thing, Valerie. Mothers don't abandon their children. But I'm not abandoning my son. I'm stopping him from using me." Robert approached me and took my hands in his. They were cold and trembling. "Mom, I promise I'm going to change. I'm going to get help. I'm going to find a job. I'm going to make things right this time. Just give me one more chance." I looked at those hands, once so small that I'd held when he learned to walk, when he was afraid of the dark, when he needed comfort after a nightmare. "Robert, how many last chances have I given you? How many times have you made me the same promise?" He couldn't answer because we both knew the answer. I had lost count of the times we'd had this very conversation, of the broken promises and crushed hopes. "Your lease is up next month," I announced, gently pulling my hands from his. "You have 30 days to find a solution. After that, I will no longer be responsible for your housing." Valerie stormed toward the door. "Let's go, Robert. I'm not staying here to be humiliated by a woman who doesn't understand what family means." But Robert didn't move. "Valerie, you can go if you want. I need to talk to my mother." His voice had a firmness I hadn't heard in years. And for a moment, just for a moment, I saw a glimmer of the man he could have been. Valerie stopped dead in her tracks when she heard Robert's words. She turned slowly, her expression a mix of disbelief and pure fury. "You're asking me to leave after everything I've sacrificed for this marriage?" Her voice had become shrill, almost hysterical, and she gesticulated with her hands as if conducting an invisible orchestra. "Valerie, please, I need to sort this out with my mom. Too much has happened tonight." Robert tried to explain, but she cut him off with a gasp that probably woke up the entire block. "No, I'm not going anywhere. If you're going to grovel like a dog in front of your mother, you're going to do it with me here." She crossed her arms and planted herself firmly in the center of my dining room like a statue of stubbornness. "Besides, this conversation affects me directly. If she stops paying our rent, where are we going to live? In a homeless shelter?" I watched the scene with a mix of fascination and horror. In a single night, I had seen the perfect facade this couple had built crumble, revealing the lies they had been weaving for months. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Terrible, but impossible to look away from. "Valerie," I said finally, "I think you've said enough for one night. You've made it very clear what you think of me, and I've been equally clear about what I think of the two of you. There's not much more to discuss." "Yes, there is much more to discuss," she shrieked, her face as red as her dress. "You can't ruin our lives just because you were offended by a comment. Families forgive. Families support each other." The hypocrisy of her words struck me like a slap. "Families support each other?" I repeated slowly. "Do you mean the way you've supported me tonight? Or the way Robert has supported me by lying about his employment? Or maybe you mean the way you've supported me by letting me sacrifice my savings while you live like nothing's wrong?" Robert sat down heavily in one of the dining chairs, his head in his hands. "Mom, I know we've made terrible mistakes. I know we've hurt you in unforgivable ways. But if you turn your back on us now, we literally have nowhere to go." "That's not my problem," I replied, the words coming out with a harshness that surprised even myself. "For 70 years, I've been taking care of others. I took care of my parents until they died. I took care of your father through his illness. I've taken care of you since the day you were born. Do you know when the last time someone took care of me was? When was the last time someone worried about my well-being?" The silence that followed was deep and painful. Robert lifted his head and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since he was a little boy, that mix of guilt and understanding that appeared when he finally realized he had done something very wrong. "Never," he admitted in a barely audible voice. "I've never worried about taking care of you. I always assumed you'd be there, that you'd always be fine, that you'd always have the strength to solve all the problems." Valerie seemed to be losing patience with this emotional conversation. "Enough of the melodrama, Shirley. You're the mother. It's your responsibility to help your son. You can't just decide you don't want to be a mother anymore." Those words were the final straw. I walked toward Valerie until I was just inches from her face. And when I spoke, my voice was so low and menacing, she instinctively recoiled. "Never, ever tell me what kind of mother I should be. I've been a mother for 35 years. I've sacrificed my youth, my dreams, my opportunities, my money, my health, everything for my son. What have you sacrificed? Your beauty treatments? Your $400 shoes?" Valerie tried to respond, but I continued without giving her a chance. Being a mother doesn't mean being a permanent ATM. Being a mother doesn't mean accepting humiliation and disrespect. Being a mother means teaching your children to be responsible, independent, respectful people, and in that, I have clearly failed. Robert stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "Don't say that. You've been a wonderful mother. I'm the one who failed. I'm the one who messed up." "Yes, Robert, you failed. But I also failed by letting it go this far, by letting you turn into a man who lies to his wife, who lies to his mother, who allows the woman who raised him to be humiliated." Tears streamed down my cheeks, but my voice remained firm. Valerie had started to pace the dining room like a caged animal. "This is a nightmare. This is a nightmare. In-laws are supposed to help their daughters-in-law. We're supposed to be a family." "Family?" I interrupted her with a bitter laugh. "When have you ever treated me like family, Valerie? When have you shown me respect, affection, or consideration? From the day you met Robert, you've treated me like an obstacle, something annoying you had to tolerate to keep your husband happy." "That's not true," she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's not true?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Do you remember last Christmas when you suggested it would be better for you to spend the holidays alone because I didn't understand modern traditions? Do you remember when I offered to cook for your anniversary and you said you preferred something more sophisticated? Do you remember when you criticized me for wearing my favorite purple dress because women my age should wear more subtle colors?" Each example I gave was like a small stab, and I could see Robert flinch with every memory. He had been there for all those occasions, he had heard every hurtful comment, and he had never said a word in my defense. "Valerie," I continued, "you never wanted to be part of this family. You wanted this family to disappear so you could have Robert all to yourself. Well, congratulations. It looks like you're going to get exactly what you wanted." Robert approached me, his eyes full of tears. "Mom, please, if that's what you want, Shirley, then fine. But don't come crying to me when you realize you've lost your only son forever, when you're all alone in this old house, surrounded by your musty memories, remembering that you had a family and you kicked them out for your stupid pride." Her words were designed to wound me, to make me feel guilty, to break my resolve. And for a moment, they almost worked. The image of being alone in this house, without visits, without phone calls, without anyone who needed me, was terrifying. Valerie's words echoed in the dining room like a curse, aimed directly at my greatest fear: loneliness. For a moment, the picture she had painted took hold of my mind. I saw myself in this empty house, without the laughter of grandchildren who never came, without Sunday phone calls, without anyone to remember my birthday. The silence between us was sticky, and I could feel Robert watching me, waiting for my resolve to break. But then something extraordinary happened. Instead of feeling panic or despair, I felt a deep and liberating calm. "You know what, Valerie?" I said slowly, savoring each word. "I'd rather be alone and at peace than accompanied and humiliated. I prefer my musty memories of a happy marriage and years of honest work to living a life of new memories built on lies and disrespect." Valerie blinked a few times, as if she hadn't expected that response. Robert's mouth fell open. He was slowly processing that his last emotional blackmail card had failed completely. "Besides," I continued, feeling a new energy coursing through me, "I'm not going to be as alone as you think. Just yesterday, I got a call that changed everything, but you two were so busy plotting how to humiliate me tonight that I didn't get to tell you. Michael Jenkins called." The name landed in the dining room like a nuclear bomb. Robert froze, and for the first time all night, Valerie was completely speechless. Michael had been my boyfriend in college, the man I had planned to marry before I met Robert's father. He was an ambitious, intelligent man who had decided to move to America to seek better opportunities when I chose to stay behind and start a family. "Michael Jenkins?" Robert murmured, his voice trembling. "The Michael from the photos? Your college boyfriend?" I nodded slowly, enjoying the expression of utter shock on their faces. "The one and only. Turns out, after 40 years of building an engineering company in Seattle, after raising 3 successful kids and losing his wife 2 years ago, he decided to look up his old friends. He found me on social media, and we've been talking on the phone for the past 2 weeks." Valerie finally found her voice, though it sounded strangled. "What do you mean you've been talking?" Her face had turned a sickly greenish color that didn't suit her at all. "I mean exactly that. We've been talking every day, reminiscing about old times, catching up on our lives, our fulfilled and unfulfilled dreams, and last night he made me an offer that took my breath away." Robert approached me with hesitant steps. "What kind of offer, Mom?" I smiled for the first time all night, a genuine smile that came from the depths of my heart. "He invited me to spend a month at his home in Seattle. He says he wants to show me Washington State, introduce me to his kids, and that he's always wondered what would have happened if—" I left the sentence hanging, enjoying the absolute silence that had taken over the dining room. "But Mom," Robert stammered, "you can't go with a man you haven't seen in 40 years. What if he's a scammer? What if he's lying to you? What if—" "What if, Robert?" I interrupted him with a surprising firmness. "What if he turns out to be a liar just like you? What if he uses me just like you have? At least with Michael, I'll be on an adventure, seeing new places, and being valued for who I am, not for what I can give financially." Valerie had collapsed into a chair, her face in her hands. "This can't be happening. This is a nightmare. You can't be serious about leaving with a stranger." "Michael isn't a stranger to me. He knows my dreams, my fears, my hopes, because we shared them when we were young. He knows I always wanted to travel, that I always wanted to see the Pacific Ocean, that I always dreamed of writing a book about my experiences as a seamstress. Do you know what the first thing he said to me was, when he called? He said, 'Shirley, I hope you've chased all your dreams because you deserve an extraordinary life.'" Tears began to stream down my cheeks, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. "When was the last time you two asked me about my dreams? When was the last time you cared if I was happy, if I had plans, if there was anything I wanted to do with my life?" Robert tried to approach me, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Michael sent me photos of his house, of his garden full of orange and yellow flowers, of the ocean view from his deck. He told me about his trips to Europe, about the books he's read, about the dinners he cooks for his friends every Friday. And you know what else he told me?" Valerie lifted her head to look at me, her eyes red and full of resentment. "What did he tell you?" "He told me that a woman my age and with my experience is a treasure. He said I have stories to tell, wisdom to share, and love to give. He told me that any man would be lucky to have my company, my conversation, my affection." My voice broke slightly as I remembered those words that had healed wounds I didn't even know I had. After I hung up that call, I sat in my kitchen and cried for an hour, But I didn't cry from sadness. I cried from relief. I cried because someone had finally reminded me that I am more than a mother, more than a provider, more than a free maid. I am a woman with my own value. Robert had gone ashen. "Mom, please don't make any hasty decisions because of what happened tonight. Michael might just be saying what you want to hear. Scammers are very clever." "Stop it!" I yelled with a force that surprised even me. "Stop trying to control my life. Stop telling me what I can or can't do. For 35 years I've lived for you. I've made every decision thinking about your well-being, your future, your happiness. For the first time in decades, I'm going to make a decision thinking about myself." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert had collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands, sobbing like a small child. Valerie looked at me with a mix of hatred and terror, as if she had seen a ghost. "You know what else Michael told me?" I continued, feeling my confidence grow with every word. "He said he'd kept a photo of me from when we were 20, the one where I'm wearing the white dress with red flowers that I made myself. He told me that all these years, especially after his wife died, he would look at that photo and wonder if I had been happy, if I had managed to fulfill my dreams." Robert looked up, his eyes swollen from crying. "And what did you tell him?" I told him the truth. I told him that I'd had moments of happiness, especially when you were little, when your father was alive, when I thought I was building something beautiful called a family. But I also told him that I had sacrificed so much of myself in the process that I no longer remembered who Shirley was before she was Robert's mother or Charles's widow. Valerie stood up abruptly, as if she had been stung by a wasp. "This is ridiculous! You can't go with that man! What are people going to say? A woman your age chasing romantic adventures like a teenager?" I looked her directly in the eyes and smiled with a serenity I hadn't felt in years. "Valerie, my dear, after tonight, what people think is the last thing I care about. After all, if my own family considers me inferior and mediocre, what does the opinion of strangers matter?" Robert finally found the strength to speak. "Mom, if you really want to meet Michael, if you really want to travel, we could support you. Just don't do it out of spite. Don't ruin your life just to punish us." "Ruin my life?" I repeated in disbelief. "Robert, don't you understand? This isn't a decision made out of spite. This is a decision for survival. For the first time in decades, someone is offering me a chance to be happy, to be valued, to be loved for who I am, not for what I can give." I walked to the dining room window and looked outside, at the street where I had lived for so many years, where I had raised my son, where I had buried so many dreams. Tomorrow, I'm going to call Michael and accept his invitation. I'm going to buy a plane ticket, pack a suitcase with my best dresses, and find out if it's still possible to be happy at 70. The weeks that followed that dinner were the strangest of my life. Robert tried to call me every day for the first week, leaving desperate messages on my answer. I told him about my years of sewing, about the wedding dresses I had created, about the stories each client had shared with me. It was strange and wonderful to feel interesting again, to feel that someone valued my experiences and memories. "Shirley," he said to me during one of our late-night calls, "I've been thinking about you for 40 years. When I married my wife, when my kids were born, when I built my company, there was always a part of me that wondered what would have happened if I had been brave enough to ask you to come to America with me." His words filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in decades. "Michael, I thought about you many times too, especially when things were tough, when your father was sick, when Robert started having problems. I wondered what my life would have been like if I had gotten on that plane with you." "Well," he replied with that deep laugh I remembered perfectly, "it's never too late to find out, is it?" The plane ticket lay on my nightstand, real and tangible, like a promise of freedom. Departure, March 15th. Destination, Seattle, Washington. Michael had insisted on paying for the ticket, but I had refused his offer. "This is my decision, my adventure," I had told him. "I want to pay for it with my own money." The money I had saved for months by depriving myself of medicine and decent food. Money I would now use for something that would make me happy for the first time in years. 3 days before my trip, Robert showed up at my door. He looked terrible, gaunt, with deep circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled as if he had slept in them. "Mom, please, we need to talk," he said in a broken voice that, despite everything, broke my heart. I let him in, but kept my emotional distance. "Where's Valerie?" I asked as I made coffee in my small kitchen. "At her parents' house," he replied, sitting down heavily on my kitchen chair. "She left a week ago. She says she can't be with me if I don't have a job, if I can't maintain the lifestyle she deserves." He laughed bitterly. "Turns out her superior mother isn't so superior when it comes to helping out financially. They told her to fend for herself." I felt a pang of satisfaction that wasn't particularly noble, but which I couldn't help. "So what are you going to do now?" "I've been desperately looking for work. I've applied everywhere, Mom. Offices, restaurants, stores, construction, anything. I'm willing to do anything." He looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Genuine humility. "I've also been going to therapy. I found a community center that offers free services." "I'm glad to hear that, Robert," I said, and I meant it. That's a big step. The therapist helped me understand a lot of things about myself that I didn't want to see. He helped me understand that I've been an emotional and financial parasite, not just with you, but with everyone who has tried to help me. His words sounded rehearsed, as if he had practiced this speech many times in front of a mirror. "And what have you learned specifically?" I asked, curious to see if there had really been a change, or if this was just another manipulation. Robert took a moment to answer, nervously toying with his coffee cup. "I've learned that I never learned to be responsible because you were always there to rescue me. It's not your fault," he quickly added when he saw my expression. "It's mine." But the pattern was set very early on, and I never made the effort to break it. I nodded slowly. "And Valerie, what did you learn about your relationship with her?" "That what I felt for her wasn't love. It was emotional dependency. I liked that she was demanding and critical because it gave me an excuse not to grow up, to continue being a child who needed his mom to rescue him." He stopped and looked me directly in the eyes. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I've destroyed our relationship, but I need you to know that for the first time in my adult life, I'm seeing things clearly." "And what exactly do you see?" I asked carefully. "I see a 70-year-old woman who sacrificed her entire life for a son who never appreciated it. I see a woman who worked her hands to the bone to give me an education and opportunities that I wasted. I see a woman who deserves to be happy, who deserves to be valued, who deserves to chase her own dreams after decades of chasing mine." His words moved me, but they also made me cautious. "Robert, I'm glad to hear you're reflecting on these things, but words are easy. Real change takes time and consistent action." "I know," he said, nodding vigorously. "And I'm not here to ask you to cancel your trip. I'm not here to ask for money or help. I'm here to tell you that I'm going to show you with actions that I can change, even if you're no longer here to see it." "What do you mean by that?" Robert stood up and started pacing my small kitchen. "I got a job at a cleaning company. It's night work and the pay is low, but it's honest, and it allows me to live in a small room I rented downtown. I'm also taking online classes to get a certification in accounting." I looked at him in genuine surprise. "When did you decide to do all this?" "The night after our dinner, when I got home, and Valerie started yelling at me for ruining our financial situation. Something inside me just snapped. I realized I was 35 years old and had never been responsible for my own life, not for a single day." He sat down again and took my hands in his. "Mom, I want you to go to Seattle. I want you to meet Michael, to see the ocean, to write that book you've always wanted to write. I want you to be happy, even if it means I'm no longer part of your life." For the first time since the night of the dinner, I felt like I was talking to my real son, not the manipulative, dependent version I had known for so many years. "Robert, you're always going to be a part of my life. You're my son, and you always will be. But I need you to understand that our relationship can't stay the same. I understand completely, he said firmly, and I want you to know that I'm going to work on becoming the kind of son you can be proud of, even if it takes years, even if by then it's too late to repair our relationship. We sat in silence for several minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Robert spoke again. Will you tell me about Michael? What was he like when you were young? An involuntary smile spread across my face. He was brilliant, ambitious, gentle. He had a way of making me feel like the most interesting woman in the world. When we talked, he would focus entirely on me, as if my words were the most important thing he had ever heard. Why didn't you go with him when he moved to America? Because I was afraid, I admitted. Afraid of leaving everything I knew, afraid of failing, afraid of not being good enough for him. And then I met your father, and he represented security, stability, a predictable life. I paused. I don't regret choosing your father. He was a good man, and we had beautiful moments. But now I have a second chance to find out what would have happened if I had been braver. Robert nodded slowly. Do you think Michael has really thought about you all these years? Or do you think he's idealizing the past? Robert's question made me think deeply. You know, Robert, I've asked myself that same question every night since Michael contacted me. Is what he feels real, or are we just two old people idealizing a youthful love? I stood up and walked to the window, watching the garden where I had planted roses so many years ago. But then I realized that it doesn't matter. What do you mean it doesn't matter? Robert asked, genuinely curious. It doesn't matter if what we feel is nostalgia, idealization, or true love. What matters is that for the first time in decades, I feel alive, I feel valuable, I feel like a woman who deserves to be courted, admired, respected. I turned to look at him. When was the last time I felt that way? When was the last time anyone made me feel special just for being me? Robert lowered his head, ashamed. I never made you feel that way, did I? I always took you for granted, something that would always be available no matter how I treated you. Exactly. And it wasn't just you, Robert. Your father, too. Toward the end of our marriage, he started to see me only as the woman who cooked, cleaned, and took care of him when he was sick. I stopped being Shirley and became just Charles's wife, and then just Robert's mother. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Michael, calling at the time we had agreed on, as always. I looked at Robert, who nodded, indicating I should answer. Hello, beautiful, Michael's voice said through the phone, and I immediately felt that familiar warmth spreading through my chest. How was your day? Interesting, I replied, smiling despite the tension. My son is here. Robert, would you like to say hello to Michael? Robert froze for a moment, but then slowly nodded. I put the phone on speaker. Michael, I'd like you to meet Robert, my son. Robert, this is Michael Jenkins. Hello, Robert. Yes, sir, it is complicated, but I'm starting to understand that my mother deserves to be happy, even if that means big changes in our lives. That's a very mature response, Michael replied with approval. I'll tell you something, Robert. I have 3 kids, all adults, and it took them years to understand that their parents are complete people with their own needs and desires, not just eternal providers of support and resources. Robert looked at me in surprise. It was clear he hadn't expected Michael to be so direct, yet so understanding at the same time. Mr. Jenkins, Robert continued, can I ask you what your intentions are with my mother? Michael chuckled softly. That's a fair question. My intentions are to get to know the woman the girl I fell in love with 40 years ago became. My intentions are to show her beautiful places, to introduce her to my kids, to cook for her, to listen to her stories, and perhaps, if we both decide we want to build a deep friendship or something more. And if things don't work out as you expect, Robert asked, then we will have had a beautiful adventure. We will have closed a chapter that was left open for decades, and your mother will have had a well-deserved vacation in Washington. There's no pressure, Robert. No unrealistic expectations. Just 2 older people giving themselves a chance to rediscover joy. Robert visibly relaxed. Thank you for being so honest, sir. Call me Michael, please. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to speak with your mother alone for a moment. Robert nodded and walked to the living room, giving me privacy for my phone call. "How do you feel after talking to him?" I asked Michael once we were alone. "I feel good. He seems to be a young man going through a moment of growth. That speaks well of how you raised him, Shirley. Children who never face difficulties never learn to be resilient." His words reassured me more than I expected. "Michael, are you sure you want to involve yourself in your peaceful life with a woman who has so much family drama?" "Shirley, my dear, we all have family drama at our age. One of my sons got divorced last year and moved back into my house with his 2 small kids. My daughter is having a midlife crisis and calls me crying every Tuesday. My youngest son is struggling with a video game addiction that's affecting his marriage." He laughed softly. "Family drama is a part of life. The difference is how we handle it. And how you're handling it, with clear boundaries and with firm love, and by always remembering that your kids are adults responsible for their own decisions and consequences. That's something you seem to be learning to do as well." After hanging up with Michael, Robert and I continued talking late into the night. He told me more details about his therapy, about how he was learning to identify behavioral patterns he had repeated for years without realizing it. "You know what was the hardest thing to accept in therapy?" he asked me as we drank a second cup of coffee. "What?" "That it wasn't just that I was lazy or immature. It was that I had developed an emotional addiction to being rescued. Every time someone solved a problem for me, every time I was given money or pulled out of a tight spot, I felt a kind of euphoric relief. It was like a drug." His words hit me hard. "And how are you supposed to break that addiction?" "By facing the consequences of my actions without seeking rescue. When I lost my last job, my first instinct was to come running to you with a sad story. But this time, instead, I slept in my car for 3 days until I got the cleaning job." "You slept in your car?" I asked with automatic maternal concern. "Yes, and it was one of the most important experiences of my life. For the first time, I truly understood what it means to not have a safety net, what it means for my actions to have real consequences." He looked me directly in the eyes. "Mom, during those 3 nights, I thought a lot about you. I thought about all the times you had to choose between your needs and mine, and you always chose mine. That's what mothers do, Robert." "No, Mom. That's what mothers who haven't learned to set healthy boundaries do, and that's what children who have never learned to be responsible adults do." He leaned forward. "The therapist helped me understand that by constantly rescuing me, you were unintentionally depriving me of the opportunity to grow." His words hurt me, but they also freed me. For years, I had felt guilty every time I considered saying no to Robert, every time I thought about putting my needs first. Now I understood that my generosity had actually been a way of controlling him, of keeping him dependent on me. "So what happens now?" I asked softly. "Now I'm going to prove, first to myself and then to you, that I can be a responsible adult. I'm going to pay my own bills. I'm going to make my own decisions. I'm going to face my own problems. And when you come back from Seattle, if you decide to come back, I'm going to be a son you can be proud of. And if I decide to stay in Seattle?" Robert smiled, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine joy in his smile instead of manipulation. "Then I'll be happy for you. I'll visit you when I can. I'll call you every week, and I'll live my own life knowing that my mother is finally living hers." The day of my departure dawned with a clear sky and a gentle breeze that seemed to whisper promises of adventures to come. Robert arrived early to take me to the airport, and for the first time in years, there was no tension between us. He had brought flowers, a small bouquet of white daisies that I knew were my favorite, and a sealed letter. "Don't open it until you're on the plane," he said with a shy smile. "It's something I needed to say to you, but it's easier for me to write than to speak." During the drive to the airport, we talked about everyday things, the weather, the news, his plans for the week. It was a normal conversation between a mother and son, something we hadn't had in years. There were no pleas, no drama, no guilt, just a quiet conversation between two adults who loved each other but finally understood healthy boundaries. "Mom," he said when we arrived at the airport, "I want you to know that no matter what happens in Seattle, this has already been worth it." "What do you mean?" "Seeing you like this, excited, nervous, happy, I haven't seen you shine this way in years." He helped me take my suitcase out of the car, a suitcase I had carefully packed with my best dresses, including a new coral pink one I had bought especially for this trip. At the airport, Robert walked me to the security gate. When it was time to say goodbye, we hugged with an intensity we hadn't shared since he was a little boy. "I love you, Mom," he whispered in my ear. "Have fun. Fall in love. Be happy. You deserve it more than anyone in the world." "I love you too, son, and I'm proud of the man you're becoming." Once on the plane, I opened Robert's letter with trembling hands. His handwriting, which had always been messy, looked more mature, more careful. "Mom," it began, "during these past few days, I've been thinking about all the times you were a hero without me noticing. When you worked double shifts to pay for my school books, when you sold your new sewing machine to buy me a bicycle, when you pretended not to be hungry so I could eat more, when you stayed up all night taking care of me when I was sick, all those moments of silent love that I took for granted. Now I understand that being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until you disappear. It means loving enough to teach independence. It means being brave enough to let go when it's time. Thank you for finally loving me enough to let me grow up. Fly high, Mom, literally and figuratively. With all my love and respect, Robert. P.S. Michael is a lucky man to be meeting the most extraordinary woman in the world." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I put the letter back in my purse. Through the plane window, I could see the clouds stretching out to infinity, and for the first time in decades, I felt that my future was just as infinite. Michael was waiting for me at the Seattle airport with a bouquet of yellow roses and a smile I recognized immediately, even though he had more wrinkles and his hair was completely white. When he saw me, his face lit up with the same joy I remembered from our college days. "Shirley," he said when we hugged, "you're even more beautiful than I remembered." The days that followed were like living in a dream. Michael took me to see the Pacific coast, where for the first time in my life, I could see the ocean stretching out to the horizon. He introduced me to his kids, who welcomed me with a genuine warmth that moved me deeply. His youngest daughter, Carmen, said, "Dad hasn't smiled like that since Mom died. Thank you for bringing back his joy." Michael cooked for me every night, elaborate dinners that we savored on his deck while watching the sunset. I'm not a retired engineer. I'm just Michael, the man who fell in love with a brilliant girl 40 years ago and never forgot her. His words went straight to my heart because they expressed exactly what I felt with him. I wasn't Robert's sacrificial mother. I wasn't Charles's widow. I wasn't the tired seamstress. I was simply Shirley, a woman with stories to tell, dreams to chase, and love to give. At the end of my month in Seattle, Michael made me a proposal that changed my perspective on what was possible at 70. "Shirley, I don't want this to end. I know it's crazy. I know we're just getting to know each other again after so many years, but I want you to consider moving to Seattle, not to get married immediately, not to live together if you don't want to, but to give us the chance to build something beautiful at this stage of our lives." My first instinct was to think of all the reasons why it was impossible. My house, my few friends, my life in my hometown. But then I thought of Robert, of his letter, of his words about flying high. I thought of Valerie, who had probably never truly respected me. I thought of all the years I had lived for others, putting my own dreams on hold. "What if things don't work out?" I asked. "Then we will have had a beautiful adventure." "But surely, what if they do work out? What if, after a lifetime of putting others first, you finally have the opportunity to be completely happy?" That night, I called Robert to tell him about Michael's proposal. His response surprised me and filled me with pride. "Mom, are you happy with him?" "Happier than I've been in decades. He treats me well, he respects me, he makes me feel valuable every day. Then stay. Build the life you deserve. I'll be fine. In fact, I'll be better knowing that you're finally living for yourself. 6 months later, I was packing my most cherished belongings in my old house, getting ready to move to Seattle permanently. Robert helped me with the entire process, demonstrating a maturity and responsibility that filled me with hope for his future. "You know what the most ironic part of all this is?" he said to me as we packed up the family photos. "What?" "That by letting you go, I feel like I've finally gotten you back. Not as the mother who constantly rescues me, but as the extraordinary woman you always were, but whom I never bothered to truly get to know." As I write this story from Michael's deck, watching the Pacific Ocean and waiting for him to come back from the market where he's gone to buy ingredients for the dinner we will cook together, I reflect on all that has changed. Robert is successfully building his own life. He got a promotion at his job. He moved to a better apartment and is dating a woman who challenges him to be a better person instead of enabling his dependency. Valerie, he told me, married an older man who can maintain her lifestyle, which is probably for the best for everyone. And me? I finally learned that it's never too late to be happy. I learned that self-love isn't selfishness, but the foundation for being able to love others in a healthy way. I learned that a 70-year-old woman can have adventures, can fall in love, can start over. Michael and I got married last month in a small ceremony on the beach, with his kids and Robert as witnesses. Robert cried throughout the entire ceremony, but they were tears of joy. "I never thought I'd see my mother marry for love," he told me afterward. "I always assumed your marriage to Dad had been just for convenience and family. Now, when I look back at that terrible night when Valerie humiliated me in my own home, I see it as the greatest gift I could have received, because it was that humiliation that finally woke me up. It was that humiliation that showed me I deserved more. It was that humiliation that gave me the courage to chase the happiness I thought I had lost forever. And you? What would you do if life gave you a second chance to be completely happy? Would you have the courage to take it, no matter what others think? Because believe me, it's never too late to start over." Did you like